I want to greet everybody for today's seminar. Today is the first seminar of academic year 2021 and 2022 with regards to Eurasian Research Institute. I wish you all a happy and enjoyable academic season. So today we are with Dr. Azimjan Kitakhunov. He will be presenting us the rising food prices, the reasons of this phenomenon, and also the risks associated with these rising food prices, particularly in Central Asia, and also to be specific in Kazakhstan as well. There are a number of reasons why food prices is on the rise in the couple of last years or so. So Dr. Kitakhunov will give a thorough analysis, a systematic overview of these reasons. And probably it will be very interesting for all of us because everybody is going to groceries and shopping food, doing shopping for food. So it touches to everybody's daily life as well, not only to economics, not only to trade, not only to politics, and also environmental issues as well, particularly because climate change is one of the factors that probably will keep the food prices high in the coming decades or so. In the last couple of years, we have witnessed significant droughts and also extreme weather events, sometimes intense heat waves, and sometimes floods, which always give harm to the food production, especially in the agricultural sector, of course. So we will deal with all these issues and more. I want to give the floor to Dr. Kitakhunov if he is ready. So please.
Good day, dear colleagues, dear participants. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so as Bakr Bey mentioned, the theme is very important, topical and relevant nowadays, given the current rise of global food prices and global food prices and the rise of food prices in Central Asia and in Kazakhstan. So my plan for today's presentation is like this. I will start with overview of the global food prices, and then we'll detailize with causes of food price changes. We'll identify risks of higher food prices, then go to food prices in Central Asia with focus on price changes in Kazakhstan, determine risks for Kazakhstan and how these risks affect the situation, food situation in Central Asia, and we'll finalize with policy recommendations, which we believe can stabilize the food market. So in general, this is a situation with food situation in the world. You see that in 2021, we have a sharp increase in food price index presented by Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. So you see that in 2021, this index equal to almost 121 points, while in 2020, it was only 98 points. And it should be noted that here that prices started to rise before the pandemic, that rise was insignificant, but the pandemic accelerated this process and led to a significant increase in prices. So you see here that from through in April 2020, international food producer prices have increased by 47.2%, attaining the highest real levels on May 2021 since 2014, and that was the highest level ever in current dollar terms. And the current situation is also concerning because you see that the FAO food price index averaged 127.4 points in current August, up 3.9 points. This is 3.1% from July, and 31.5 points. This is 32, almost 33% from the same period last year. And this rebound in August, after 2 consecutive months of decline, was led by strong gains in the sugar, vegetable oils, and cereal sub-indices. And here we present the FAO food price index by product groups, by products. And you see that almost all products experienced significant changes, excluding sugar price index and the meat price index. For those groups, the price increase was insignificant. But we see that growth in prices for oils, for instance, was very significant, and the index was equal to 156.4 points, while the cereals index amounted to 126.7 points, and followed by dairy price index, which reached almost 117 points. So, and between May 2020 and May 2021, soybean and corn prices increased by more than 86 and 111% respectively. So this is a very sharp and very significant increase in food prices. So these are causes of higher food prices. So this is a theoretical issue which was concluded and generated by an important publication written by Hedy and Fan. So you see a list of factors which generally affect higher food prices. So the first one is currency depreciation. So followed, we know this, and it is very important for food import-dependent countries. So if we have for currency depreciation, then any imported food became more expensive. Productivity slowed down. This is a macroeconomic aspect. Rising oil prices, also a key factor. We know that the current agriculture is very energy intensive, and energy is being used at every stage of production. So higher prices means higher transportation costs, high production costs, and this also contributes significantly to increase in agricultural prices. Export restrictions. So an important measure, an important policy, which generally aimed at reducing internal food prices. But when the country, for instance, if it is the United States or Russia, an important contributor to the global food market, then these export restrictions mean that global supply generally decreases and the prices go up, and at the same time it is overcome the changes in internal markets. So export restrictions can lead to significant price changes, in particular substantial increase. So weather shocks and climate change is a very important agenda nowadays. We know we experience it during last 2-3 years, and it has become a global agenda since it affects every region and agriculture in particular. And this is a bilateral impact because agriculture also affects climate change, but I'll talk it later. So growth in demand, generally this demand is led by Asian countries such as China and India. And according to the theory, we know that if we have very high demand, at the same lower, for instance, if demand outpaces supply, then we'll have an increase in prices. And financial market speculation, we know that prices are not only, nowadays, it's not only about the demand and supply, it is also forecasted and predicted using different indicators such as economic growth, transportation growth, expectations. So financial markets also can contribute to control prices. So that is, and decline of stocks. So if we expect not so promised years, we try to increase our stocks, and if our stocks generally decline, then we have lower supply, so then this also affect the prices. So, and these are some facts about recent increase in prices. So you see that as it was shown using the statistical data of the previous figure one, food price inflation started increasing before the pandemic. And there were very important factors such as African swine fever, introduction of Chinese import tariffs on US pork and soybeans during the US-China trade war and trade dispute. Also, its increase, early lockdown measures and supply chain disruptions induced a spike in consumer food prices, and food supply chain disruptions shift from food services such as dining out towards retail, grocery, and consumer stockpiling pushed up consumer food prices, food pricings. And at the same time, soaring shipping and sorry. Sorry, I have some issue here. So soaring and soaring shipping and transport costs. So ocean freight rates have increased around 2-3 times in the last 12 months, while higher gasoline prices and truck driver shortage in some regions also contributed negatively to these price changes. So there are also important factors that should be identified and mentioned. So this is a demand for staples for both human consumption and animal feed, which remained high, especially from China, as countries have stockpiled food reserves due to pandemic-related worries about food security. The recent 2020-2021 period, a global weather event occurring every few years, has led to dry weather in key food exporting countries, including Argentina, Brazil, Russia, Ukraine, the United States, and in our country, in Kazakhstan also. And strong demand for biofuels increased speculative demand by non-commercial traders, and export restrictions are additional factors supporting world producer prices. And the outlook of the IMF staff is that consumer food price inflation will pick up again in the remainder of 2021 and 2022. So the recent sharp increase in international food prices has already slowly started to feed into domestic consumer prices in some regions, as retailers unable to absorb the rising costs are passing on the increases to consumers. Okay. And these are additional factors which are determined by Sova and Mann in their recent publication. So they detailize that disruption of global supply chains played a key role in this situation, as the location of ships and containers goes through the painful and slow process of realigning with supply and demand. So the cost of moving grain between major markets had more than doubled from pre-pandemic levels. And we should note here that countries in North Africa and the Middle East import more than 90% of their food, while Sub-Saharan Africa boasts a nearly 45 billion annual food import bill. Climate crisis, we see expectations of Brazil that they expect that the production of food, in particular corn production, will decrease by almost 10%, while wheat production in the United States will fall by almost 40%. And also it is important to mention the problem of local supply chain breaks lockdowns and quarantine measures that affected the informal sector. So it is very important for smallholders, sellers, traders, shop owners, and their the like. In the United Nations World Food Programme's local market assessments, the prices of food increased by more than 10% in 15 developing countries in the first quarter of 2020. So, and this is a potential impact and risks. The good news is that this impact will vary by country and the measures which will be taken to address all those risks. But according to all estimates, almost all estimates, the developing countries and low-income countries will be at greater risk because consumers in emerging markets could experience higher risks because of higher dependence on food imports from the pandemic. That further food inflation could be dire and the risk of hunger. And these are the very important and concerning statistics that today percent of the world's population
I think there's a problem with the internet connection. Maybe Cengiz Han, can you share the screen instead of Azimcan? Ah, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Is it okay now?
Yes. Okay. Just
okay.
Go on.
So I want just to mention that around 800 million people, about 10% of the world's population, go to bed hungry every night, and at least 2.4 billion lack access to a healthy and nutritious diet. So developing nations then are suffering from a triple whammy: higher commodity prices, increased freight costs and wait times, and reduced purchasing power. So, and this is a food situation in Central Asia. So these are three important factors which should be mentioned here. The first one is dependence on imports. So according to theory, we saw that this is a very significant risk. If the country depends on food imports, then it is very sensitive to macroeconomic risks, especially currency risks. If we imagine a situation when a country imports the food and the food supplier, for instance, have some kind of macroeconomic shocks, which increases the producer prices, then we also import an inflation. And all countries in Central Asia are food dependent. And also Kazakhstan remains an important supplier of food in Central Asia for the remaining countries. Prevalence of smallholders and subsistence farming. So the agricultural sector is mainly characterized in our region by subsistence farming, and which generally complicates the work of government in order to determine the appropriate measures to distribute and allocate support measures and provide compensations, for instance, if they have some kind of droughts or floods. And climate risks, of course, 2-3 years we see output vulnerability, especially in the food sector. And we don't have, unfortunately, so far, an adaptation and management strategies. And of course, we need investment and skills. But at the same time, we should understand here that there is a bilateral impact of climate and agriculture, because agricultural sector is also responsible for climate change, because according to estimates, almost all international organizations and which generally research climate change agree that around 30% of greenhouse gas emissions is responsibility of agriculture. So especially this is about cattle, development of cattle sector, and which generally produces methane, and methane is generally contributes to higher temperatures. And this is food prices in Central Asia, the case of Kazakhstan by the end of the period. December of the previous, also before the pandemic only accelerated this price change. And the recent price changes in Kazakhstan according to market signals. So you see that dry conditions in almost all regions of Kazakhstan, which leads to forage segments, higher input prices cause supply chain disruption. As a result, in Kazakhstan, fuel and lubricants, fertilizers, plant protection products, spare parts, agricultural machinery, and other necessary materials have risen by 20–30% compared to the last year. And their current situation, as well as similar dry conditions in the Central Asian countries, the main consumers of Kazakh wheat and flour, have led to an increased demand for grain products. So over the last decade of July 2021, the price of demand of importers for wheat of the third class increased by $15–20 per 1 ton and now stands at $260–265 per ton. And similarly, their domestic price of wheat increased from 93–95,000 tenge per ton to 103 and 105,000 tenge per ton. So, and generally, I identify such kind of risks for Kazakhstan. In 2021, Kazakhstan's agriculture suffered from the drought. It has become the primary cause of shortages for livestock and has led to low cereal yields. So now we have information that instead of the projected 15 centers per hectare, agrarians collect only 5–7 centers per hectare. Poultry breeders predict a growth in product prices in order to survive the winter safely and not lose livestock. Kazakhstani poultry farmers need over 600,000 tons of feed. The Union of Poultry Breeders speak of the need to create a forage fund to reduce the cost of feed. And of course, that was a proposal of the businessman to the government. And according to the forecasts, according to their analytics, by winter, chicken eggs may rise in price by at least 7%, and the wholesale cost of a kilogram of poultry meat will exceed 1,000 tenge. So the industry also has high risk of bankruptcy, and 4 poultry farms have already suspended their activities. So, and a significant part of the recent address of the President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev was devoted to the food sector and agricultural sector, and he proposed an important policy in order to stabilize food market and food prices in general. So his plan includes creation of network of wholesale distribution centers, unified control over prices along the chain from producer to consumer, expansion of the cultivation area of fodder crops and strengthening of control over the observance of crop rotation, improvement of veterinary medicine, and capital investment, as around 90% of the technologies used in the agro-industrial complex are completely outdated and in need of modernization. But the most important part of his speech was a revision and stabilization of the mechanism of subsidies. So he provided very important statistics that over the past 5 years alone, more than 2 trillion tenge has been allocated for subsidies. And unfortunately, more than half of the criminal cases in the agro-industrial complex are related to the theft of subsidies. So, and I interviewed several times, many farmers, whether they're aware of existence of those subsidies, and many of them are not aware and they don't know about their existence. And those who know about the existence of that state support and many other measures provided by the government, they are not able to obtain them, to receive them, because of the artificial restrictions and barriers created by the local administrations. So the risks related and associated with Kazakhstan can bring a very difficult situation for Central Asia. So we know that Kazakhstan remains an important supplier of grains and cereals to the Central Asian markets. So changes in trade policy of Kazakhstan, for instance, export duties, which is being actively discussed within the government, and also they discuss quotas and restrictions and export quotas. So this change in trade policy of Kazakhstan, for instance, can create food shortage and as a result, higher prices in our neighboring countries. At the same time, Central Asian countries also impose export restrictions on sensitive products and implement state price controls. This is a case of Kyrgyzstan, which imposed livestock export restrictions and started the state control of food prices. At the same time as any state control measures, they did not succeed because of the difficulties related to implementation of such kind of policies. And economic performance and macroeconomic situation and growth in input prices. Here, very important statistics about Kyrgyzstan that around 1.7 million people live below the poverty line in 2020. That is 25.3% of Kyrgyz population, having increased by 5.2 percentage points compared to the previous year. So in order to stabilize the market and stabilize the food prices, my recommendations are as follows. So I call for coordinated regional policy because we know that if Kazakhstan, for instance, Kazakhstan will change its trade policy, this will affect significantly the situation in Central Asia because of their, for instance, nutrition diet and prices for bread, which is also very important and contributes around 70% of daily diet in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and also southern parts of Kazakhstan. So, and if we impose some restrictions or export duties, our neighbors also can export such kind of measures, and this will be not so promising situation, which will cause high prices in the entire region. And also, it is very important now to think about food assistance in the periods of crisis because of the importance of the social aspects and the open borders. Trade liberalization is also a key factor. So we remember that when we have a potato and carrot crisis in summer, so our Minister of Trade visited our Central Asian partners in order to import and make a forward contracts with them, which will also stabilize our prices. And also after announcement of those news, the prices stabilized and the import generally increases food supply and stabilizes prices. Mutual investments, this is a long-term strategy. It should be considered by the governments and by regional authorities. Transport and transit cooperation is also important because of the fast delivery of products. And the last thing that I want to mention is free movement of labor, because if we take our country, many farmers, even smallholders use migrants from our neighboring Central Asian countries. So all these measures, I believe, and I hope that can contribute to stabilization of food prices and improvement of food security in Central Asia. So that is all. If you have questions.
Okay. Dear Dr. Kitakhunov, thank you so much for this great presentation. Except the internet connection, the presentation was a very brilliant one. And especially in the last part, the recommendations, I think, should be taken seriously by all authorities and also experts in their studies. These are quite focused and well-studied recommendations. Maybe I could add, if you would also agree, the strengthening of the institutionalization in food-related ministries, so to speak, or agencies. Can we do this? Can we add this? Because I mean, Kazakhstan is a very big country. Also, other countries are also big when compared to the European or world standards in general. So there are remote areas, there are areas far away from the city centers as well. So are there enough institutional power in those agencies studying, working on the agriculture, such as the personnel, also equipment? Are there enough control mechanisms? Are there enough, for example, agricultural engineers working on fields to guide the farmers in terms of crop changes, or instead of climate effects, or in terms of, I mean, irrigation practices, etc.? Is there enough institutional power? Can this be reinforced as well? And also about the pandemic disruption, you have mentioned this as a significant cause of problem. Do you think that this disruption in the supply chain would continue in the long run, medium term, or in the long run, or will it end soon, so that it will be a relaxation in terms of probably food prices at the end of the formula? And it's also interesting to maybe focus sector by sector. What are the effects? For example, what are the effects for the crops? What are the effects for the livestock? And also, are there any positive things applicable for Central Asia in terms of rising food prices? Can they become more powerful in terms of exports, specific products, in terms of specific products? And what would you think, which is the worse, such as being a food supplier or a food dependent nation? Which is worse? Because if you are a food supplier, okay, the prices are rising, but maybe the demand is falling. And if you are food dependent, it has also some associated problems with it. So how would you analyze which one is worse or which one is better, being a food supplier or being a food dependent? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the list of interesting questions. I will start with the first one. So institutionalization of their ministries, and also very important. And our ministry, our Minister of Trade and Integration, when visited other Central Asian countries, he mentioned that their significant problem is certification of products, also sanitary and phytosanitary norms. So because we know we are in different organizations, we are part of the Eurasian Economic Union, and the rest of the Central Asian countries such as Uzbekistan, such as Tajikistan and Turkmenistan are not the members of this organization. And at the same time, even we have a common membership with Kyrgyzstan. We have a very difficult problems with sanitary and phytosanitary norms because of they don't fit each other. And even we have disputes with Russia when we take this amount. So it needs a long investment, and it needs better specialists to be prepared in the medium term. I don't believe that it can happen very fast, but in the medium term, it is possible. Regarding the second question on specialists which can do changes and which can, for instance, implement important policy reforms. During July, we interviewed wheat producers in the northern part of our countries. So they identified the shortage of specialists as the key problem. And so because of that, they have to import and they have to attract specialists from Russia and Ukraine. And many important policy and changes in our agricultural sector at the micro level, at the firm level, are implemented and conducted by imported specialists. And of course, their services are not so cheap. And the only well-established companies in the agricultural sector can provide such kind of reforms, and the smallholders are not able, and they use the old technology, and the specifics are very different. So the details are very interesting. So I cannot mention it here because it can take a very long time. But the the reforms that are being provided by well-established companies, and if they can be provided by all agriculture producers, even smallholders, it can be very, very beneficial, and it could increase significantly the production level of our agriculture producers and the yields also. Regarding lockdowns and quarantine measures, I guess that this problem has been successfully addressed by our government, because transit of food trucks and other trucks. But the problem is all about
Yeah, I think he's on the verge of falling. And yeah, he's gone now. Okay, let us wait for a few moments for him to come back again. Probably he had checked before the internet was okay.
Yeah, we checked together 2 hours before. It was very good. Probably some momentum thing.
Yeah, your mic is.
okay.
Yeah. Not so good now. Not good. Quite bad, actually. Okay. So meanwhile, I want to open up a discussion at this point. We have colleagues from Kazakhstan and maybe from other countries as well. So while waiting for our expert to come again, what do you think about this presentation, and what are your opinions about the ongoing supply
is it
chain?
okay now?
Supply chain.
Okay. So, and
yes,
regarding,
okay now. Yeah.
I mentioned several times about the capacities of checkpoints, but the problem now is free movement of labor. So we need migrants. Russia also needs migrants, and all those migrants are also needed in the agricultural sector because there are differences in salaries. And regarding your last question, which one is better, to be a food dependent country or food supplying country? Of course, it is my opinion, and that food supplying countries are at better position despite the price changes on global or regional market, on the global and regional markets, because at the same time they have what to deliver and what to supply in the countries. In the case of export restrictions, the food dependent countries will be at very high risks. But this doesn't mean that export restrictions are good policy. I want to mention one thing, that in the case of export restrictions, for nowadays it is being actively discussed within our government, that if we implement such kind of measure, this will be a short-term effect in the local market. The prices can go down. But what about the next season? Because farmers can change their decision to produce and to diversify some kind of products. And in the next season, the supply can reduce significantly, and this will anytime increase the prices. So it is better to take into consideration the interest not only of consumers but also the farmers, and to develop better measures for compensations.
Okay, thank you. So questions from the audience now, please. Yeah, I have seen your hand.
Yes, okay.
Oh,
Thank you, Jan, for a very interesting and very enlightening presentation. I have two questions. They might seem a little general, but of course I'm expecting just a brief summary introductory for a person, a non-economist like me. The question one is the current increase of food prices globally, and if we take just and make a generalization for Central Asia, how Central Asian food price rise increase is different from the global in maybe statistical terms and maybe in certain items. And the second question is that in your presentations, and we also remember the 2010, 2011 very drastic increase in food prices. And could you also briefly explain about that the major, maybe the general principal reasons of the food increase for 2010, 2011, which is almost as significant as the current, or the period of pandemic. And I remember there have been some oil price increases, but was there anything beyond that? So these are the two questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for interesting questions. The first question is expectations about increase in food prices and what their difference between the global and Central Asian price changes. There are no significant differences between both processes, because global food industry and the Central Asian food industry were affected by the same forces, such as climate, the droughts, dry conditions. That was a global factor. At the same time, disruption of supply chains. If we take Central Asia also was affected by not only Central Asian supply chain disruptions, but also internal local disruptions of food. We well remember the situation with cabbage, when the producers were not able to export around 300,000 tons of cabbage, and they had to give it for free, and they didn't receive any kind of compensations. So, and the global expectations at the same time as Central Asian expectations is that in 2021 and 2022, the food prices will rise up to 30%. This is a global picture, which is also we can use for Central Asia. And regarding the next question, you mentioned correctly that 2010 and 2011 was a post-crisis period. That was a recovery. And you know that in 2008 and 2009, the oil prices became low, and at the same time in 2010, 2011, they almost reached the pre-crisis period around 110, 120 US dollars per barrel. So, and as I mentioned, the agriculture is a very energy-intensive industry. At the same time, that was affected by the biofuels demand in the United States, and generally the food prices started to increase. So when the oil prices increase, this increase affect generally all production stages, transportation, and many others. At the same time, higher demand. We should take it very seriously, because if global demand, for instance, Asian demand from India or China will outpace the pace of supply, then we will have any time increase in prices, because any producers, including Central Asian producers, try to supply food products to China, and these are very important factors. I hope that I answered the questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Hasan.
Thank you. So further questions, comments? Are you happy with the food prices in Kazakhstan?
No, I'm not happy.
You're not happy?
Yes, I'm not. we don't have a diversification strategy. We don't have a climate adaptation strategy. We don't have a compensation strategy. So these are all problems that should be addressed. And within the problem of smallholders, it is very difficult when more than 50% of criminals, a very significant amount of money, and around $5-6 billion. And we export around 1 billion in wheat, so that this is a very significant amount of dollars, and we could have very low prices and enough food in order to provide our Central Asian partners.
Mm-hmm. So small scale is also one of the problems as well in terms of efficiency.
If all those, many of smallholders are not even registered as farmers and as a business. So, but they contribute a significant amount of products on the market.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's a big issue. And you said we need migrants. What is the main reason for migrants? I mean, in Kazakhstan, Kazakh citizens can do the agricultural jobs, or they cannot do?
So the main reason is very economic. So the migrants are cheaper, and they can do. Our farmers believe that they can do more work than our local people. So because they're interested in, they take some volume of work. So they make an agreement, they pay for that, and this is the case. So they may go to their countries, they work, and in many cases they rent. For instance, our citizens have a land, so they rent to migrant, but they agree that after the all produced volume of goods will be sold at the predetermined price to the owner of the land, and they do such kind of business. The schemes are very different and very interesting.
Very innovative as well.
Yes, the innovations, smallholder innovations.
That's right. Very interesting. It's a similar story in Turkey as well. Somebody today expressed that we need Afghans as agricultural labor. The main thing is, cheapness, of course, and also the farmers are happy with their hardworking nature. They say they work, they can bear the work for long hours, like 10, 12, 14 hours, and they are also okay with the low payments. So the differences, these kind of differences in terms of income levels across the countries, trigger this kind of migration flows as well. Interestingly, very interestingly. I mean, like a pull factor. But is there a factor like this, for example, if the price of a food is so expensive, can this discourage farmers instead of encouraging next year or the years to come, in the sense that there will be a decline, significant, substantial decline in demand for that product? Or this is just a false,
generally, farmers react positively on higher prices, and if you have higher prices, they expect higher prices in future. So, when there are cases, certain cases when if this is a different product, for instance, if it is not a bread, or for instance for wheat, they know that for wheat they will have some compensations, and the wheat is very important product. But if this is a different product, luxury product, for instance, for rare fruit or something else, they will continue producing this product expecting higher.
So the elasticity, the elasticity of the
yes,
product
elasticity
is an important point. Yeah, and also there are not only domestic markets but also export markets as well.
Yes.
For example, there were no avocados or no dragon fruits 20 years ago in Turkey, but we have now avocados, not only supplied for domestic markets, but also being exported to other countries as well. So farmers generally tend to prefer cash crops, and also blueberries, for example, the most lucrative crop in Turkey so far per kilogram. It's around, I don't know, but at least 5,000, around 5,000 tenge or so, the raw blueberries. And there's a huge market in not only in Turkey, but also around Turkey as well. So are there any new introductions in Kazakhstan in terms of agricultural products? Because, for example, when we are going to some areas, we are seeing big, houses, the glass houses, the greenhouses. So probably Kazakhstan is now able to produce lots of fruits that have not been produced before. Are there any examples?
Yes. Yes, there are some examples. So mainly it is about vegetables. If we take southern and southeastern part, so about vegetables. And these changes are mainly led by private sector. And also I can say that according to my personal experience of interviewing many farmers, they produce traditional fruits such as apples, apricots, but this year, unfortunately, the full harvest of apricots were destroyed by. We see a significant increase in the price of apricots, and as I mentioned, nobody got a compensation for that. But because the market is being dominated by households, not or even smallholders, but households, which generally which generally sell their products to intermediates, which export those products to Russia or somewhere else, or to the northern parts of our country. And I want to say that large companies in the northern part of our country, northern Kazakhstan, they started the diversification of their production, and using the imported specialists, as I mentioned, from Ukraine and Russia. And they generally totally changed the production patterns and production technologies using one of the most important and popular technologies, the zero technology nowadays, and the Russian and Ukrainian specialists implement those changes. And but it is impossible for all farmers because it is expensive. It requires additional capital investment. As the president mentioned, 90% of machinery is outdated, and at the personal level, they can not do such kind of investments. So large companies, well-established companies, provide changes, and they diversify their production, but not smallholders. But the share of large companies are very low, but they are very important for export when we take grains. For the rest, we are importer-dependent country. Around $500–600 million. This is a deficit in the food trade of Kazakhstan.
With the greenhouses, you can almost produce anything because it's a controlled environment, and if you have good investments in terms of aeration or climatization, then you can even produce bananas or whatever, the tropical fruits or vegetables as well. What intrigued me when I was first in Kazakhstan, that nobody knew artichoke, for example. When even I show the picture of the artichoke, nobody seemed to have seen this before. Artichoke, which is a very good plant for especially liver. And artichoke peels are sold in pharmacies. Probably there is a lot of ground that can farmers utilize in Kazakhstan in terms of introducing new products such as this artichoke, and it's just an example. What is another striking factor is that when you have an internal market, internal producer group for a specific product, then importation of that product from other countries is generally discouraged by the government. And in the end, this can be against the consumers. One example is bananas in Turkey, for example. We have a banana production in south of Turkey. So the government applies some custom taxes for bananas imported from other countries, mainly big multinationals like Chiquita or Dole, etc., from Latin America through US multinationals. But when we see in Kazakhstan, this is quite the opposite. The price of banana is half of the price in Turkey. You are consuming very cheap bananas. So from the perspective of the consumer, we are pushed towards consuming national bananas, nationally produced bananas, which are less tasty, I should say. I always prefer imported bananas, even if it's a very pricey product. There's a significant difference in terms of taste. But since you don't have any, a group of banana producers in Kazakhstan, you are able to consume that beautiful fruit for much cheaper.
As I know, we don't impose any tariffs on bananas.
Probably not.
Yes.
It seems so. It's around 400 something thing, yeah. Okay, any comments, questions? Food prices. Milk prices, for example, or meat prices. Okay, I think people are not happy, but they think they cannot do anything about these prices. They are just micro actors in such a big economic market. So maybe it is time to thank once again Dr. Kitakunov for this presentation today, for the first seminar of this academic season. And thank you for all the audience for participation. Next seminar will be announced in our social media accounts. And I wish you a good week ahead and weekend as well. So hope to see you next time. Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.